What's up, guys? It's already week 10 of the NFL season, which is shocking to hear, but here we are. The Giants are now 1-7, coming out of their bye. They will play in San Francisco on Monday against Nick Mullins, who apparently is this new superstar of the NFL. If you watched Thursday Night Football, put on an absolute clinic against the Raiders. So I don't know what to expect Monday night, but who the hell knows? Who cares? So basically, today I want to get into some options that we're going to have to look into at quarterback next year, whether it's current NFL players, whether it's college prospects. And I believe I picked a total of 11 options from the list I made up. I think 5 of them were current NFL players, and 6 of them were players that could declare for the draft next year. So, I'm not sure if these players are going to declare for the draft or stay in school at this point. Not even sure if some of the NFL players are going to be released by their teams or traded by their teams. But I'm just trying to make the best educated guesses that I can at this point. So, I think a lot of people have came to the realization that Eli Manning is not going to be our quarterback next season. It took some people a lot longer than it should have taken to realize that. But, I was kind of sold by week 2 after the Dallas game that, he really didn't have much upside left and wasn't really as good as I thought he could be this year. And if you look at Eli's stats, he hasn't been terrible, but there's no way he can win on this team anymore, and the Giants just need to move on at this point. So, of course, I thank him for everything he's done, and, it's weird because he's the only quarterback I've ever watched play for the Giants outside of the Geno Smith game. I've basically watched every Giant game since 2006, so it'll be like a weird transition, but I am excited for it. I think it's long overdue at this point, but I'm excited to look at these options and who we can get, and so let's get into it. I'll start with the NFL options right now. So first option, and it's pretty obvious based off the thumbnail that it's going to be Teddy Bridgewater, currently of the New Orleans Saints, and Teddy's had an interesting career. Had some success in Minnesota, had the unfortunate knee injury that at that point was career-threatening, was able to work himself back, played in the preseason for the Jets on a 1-year contract, played some pretty good football in the preseason, and that really rose his trading stock. And I think the Jets flipped him for like a 3rd or 4th round pick or something. Great move by the Jets. But now he's backing up Drew Brees, and the good news is he's only 25 years old. He's an unrestricted free agent after this season. It looks like Drew Brees isn't going anywhere. He's not slowing down. He might even win MVP this year, as crazy as that sounds at 40 years old, 39 years old. He's also worked with Pat Shurmur in Minnesota, obviously, and he really hasn't been given a fair chance since the injury he had. So he was the Vikings starter, I think, for about 2 years, maybe 3. As I said, had some success there, but since the injury, it was really Sam Bradford, then it was Case Keenum, and he really wasn't given a shot last year. I think Bridgewater played in garbage time once last year, and maybe played for like 1 or 2 drives, so he really wasn't given a fair shot yet. And it would be nice to see him get the opportunity. I mean, if he's a free agent and would sign here on a decent contract, I could see that happening, especially with the familiarity with our coach, and I'm sure Shurmur is fond of him and wouldn't mind having him. So I think in the event that we don't get a quarterback in the draft that we want to get, I think Bridgewater might be a realistic option. And even if we do get a Justin Herbert in the draft, which would be nice, then I think the competition between him and Bridgewater would be good for this team, and I don't see why they wouldn't just sign a quarterback and draft another quarterback. I think they could do both just to up the competition, because you don't want to just hand the rookie the starting job. That's definitely not good. You want to make them work for it. So I think signing Bridgewater and drafting a quarterback is a possibility. And these other 4 guys, I mean, it's not as possible, but of course there's Tyrod Taylor, who I think will be 30 next year. Unrestricted free agent after the season. He's really not needed by Cleveland anymore because he was there to kind of mentor Baker Mayfield. Mayfield took over in week 3, I think it was, Thursday Night Football. The Browns haven't looked back since. I think Tyrod played a little bit this week because Baker was injured for like maybe a series or play, but he really hasn't been playing since. He's definitely a mobile threat, which would be good for this offensive line. Of course, our offensive line has a lot of issues, and having a mobile quarterback can help. And he was disappointing. I'm just gonna straight up say he was disappointing this season. It was only 2.5 games, but if you watched that Thursday night Jets game, which I'm assuming some of you did, he looked really, really bad in that game. Against the Jets defense that isn't terrible, but it's definitely a beatable defense. So, it was disappointing to see that, and he definitely had some weapons. But this is the same Tyrod Taylor that took the Bills to the playoffs last year, and that team, we can tell right now, is really, really bad. So that's a pretty impressive accomplishment in itself. So I give Tyrod credit for that at least. So I'm going to be honest, I don't see Tyrod as a realistic option for this team. But, I think he's really like their backup plan if just nothing works out for them in free agency or the draft. And, if they're just left with anybody, I think they would go into the season with Tyrod Taylor if they had to. But I really don't think that's their plan right now. And, I'd be pretty disappointed if they chose the 30-year-old quarterback over these other guys who are still, developing and really 25 and below. So, next, speaking of 25 and below, it's going to be Jameis Winston, the former number 1 overall pick in 2015, selected right next to Marcus Mariota. So basically, with Winston's contract, he's owed $20 million next year. If he is cut, then the Bucs don't have any dead cap space, and I don't think they owe him anything. So I think the logical thing to do would be to cut Winston. And a lot of people say that, since they benched Winston for Ryan Fitzpatrick last week, that really that's the last time they're going to see Winston in Tampa Bay. They really don't expect him to play again, and that kind of just, puts the nail in the coffin for his career in Tampa, which, sucks for Winston, obviously. When you watch Winston, you really see a player that has a lot of ups and downs. He's a guy who can, throw for a bunch of yards and look like a great quarterback one week. And then there's weeks like the Bengals one where he threw the 4 interceptions where he looked like Nathan Peterman Jr. out there. And, I just don't know why he can't consistently put it together. He definitely makes a lot of poor decisions, very turnover-prone quarterback. But then there are games where he looks incredible, like the one against Atlanta, and I think they played against maybe Cleveland it was. I know that Jameis had 2 good games when he was named the starter. I had him in fantasy football, so I would know. He had some good performances. He was still throwing interceptions in those games, but, he was still throwing for like 4 touchdowns, 3 touchdowns, and even rushed for a couple. So, he was really stuffing the stat sheet and was keeping the Bucs competitive in those games. I forget if they won or not, but he was still keeping them competitive. Of course, any former number 1 overall pick from just a few years ago is going to be an enticing player if he's out there in free agency. So, I wouldn't be shocked if the Giants took a shot on him, but, it really doesn't make a lot of sense. You want a quarterback that can work with Pat Shurmur's system, and, Winston's the kind of guy that can keep a play extended, which is nice, but, his interceptions will kill you. So, I wouldn't be shocked if the Giants kick the tires on him. I'm sure some team will. I'm sure he'll get some decent offers from other teams out there, but, I don't expect Winston to be a Giant, but it's not out of the realm of possibility. So he's kind of in that Tyrod Taylor tier, where it's like, I don't expect him to go to New York, but if it happens, I wouldn't be shocked. But, it's really not what you want when you're looking at it now in November. So now on to Jacoby Brissette. This is a more interesting one. So he's still under his rookie contract until 2019, so he's under contract next year as well. He was basically acquired from the Colts from the Patriots for Andrew Luck's insurance, because Andrew Luck, of course, that had that mysterious shoulder injury last season, and at this time last year, we had no idea if Luck was going to come back, and eventually he was just ruled out for the season. So the Colts did the smart thing and traded for a quarterback. I believe Brissette was a 5th-round pick. Don't quote me on it. 5th-round pick of the Patriots. But he's a pretty talented player. He's another guy. I think his ceiling's pretty high. He's only 24 years old. Had a pretty decent year in 2017 when he was the full-time starter for the Colts. He played all 16 games. He didn't start week 1 because he was traded for really late in the preseason. But their quarterback, who I think was Scott Tolzien, was just so bad that they had to put Brissette in. He ended up finishing that week 1 game, I think it was against the Rams, And, from there on out, he did have some impressive performances in a Colts uniform, but that team really was not good at all. So, I mean, you really can't put that much on the Brissette. I would say the current Giants roster is a lot more talented than that Colts one last year. They really had no offensive line whatsoever. So, we don't have much of an offensive line here, but it's definitely not as bad as the Colts was last year. There's a reason Andrew Luck kept getting hurt every year. So, he did have an 81 passer rating in 2017. Did have some ups, did have some downs, but any quarterback that's drafted from the the Bill Belichick regime, I'm definitely interested in. He's only 24 years old, as I said, so that's a more realistic option. I think Brissette and Bridgewater are the realistic options from this group. Taylor and Winston I wouldn't expect, and then of course we have Kyle Lauletta, 22 years old, 4th-round rookie from the Giants. He might even get a shot to play this year. I predicted a while ago that he would play this week, but, after getting arrested, not going to happen. Maybe next week. I think they get Tampa at home. I think it's a 1 o'clock game at MetLife, so maybe it happens there. I'm really not sure. It really all depends on what the Giants do Monday night in San Francisco. So it'll be interesting to see if Lauletta gets his shot. And, I mean, that's why I'm saying it makes the most sense to play Lauletta at least a few games this year to see what you have in him. I mean, if he plays this year and looks like a competent quarterback, then you realize, okay, we have, a guy who could battle for the starting job next year. But if you play Lauletta this year and he just looks like garbage, then you say, okay, he's probably going to be more of a backup quarterback. So, you need to know where Lauletta stands as an NFL quarterback, and I think it'd be the smartest thing to just play him a few games. I mean, I would play him the rest of the season, but that's just me. So I think they need to get him a few starts just to see what he's made of and see what he can do against, legit NFL defenses, not the third-team preseason players. But it'll be interesting. So, I mean, really, that's just my list. There's probably other guys out there that I'm forgetting, but these are like the 5 guys that stood out to me. So now we'll go on to the draft and look at some players that might declare this year and guys that I'm interested in. So as we sit here in early November, it seems like a lot of people's QB1 for next year is going to be Justin Herbert of Oregon. I mentioned him a while ago on this channel. I mean, I think like after the Week 2 game where I was kind of fed up with Eli at that point, I think I threw his name out there. He's a projected first-round pick, of course. Good size, 6'6", 225 pounds, and big-time upside. I mean, if you watch this guy play and watch some of his highlights, which I will put in this video, he makes some plays that not a lot of guys can make, and there's even some NFL players that can't make the plays Herbert makes. Of course, there are things that he needs to work on, but from an upside stance, he really has it all. Has all the tools to be an elite quarterback in this league, and when you watch Herbert, the thing that you like the most is how he can extend plays. His mobility is a big factor into his, in being drafted as a high quarterback. And, whenever I watch him play, I always like what I see. His teams are always doing well. They're having some disappointing games for Oregon, but for the most part, he always has them competitive. And I would love to have him as a quarterback for this team because he's such a talented player. There's really not much downside with a guy like Herbert. He's going to be a good quarterback. The question is how good he's going to be because, I think he's got all the tools to be a really good one. So, we'll see what happens with that. And by the way, the Giants right now do own the number 1 pick, overall pick, as you can see in the italics there on top. So, it's going to be a real tank battle with the Oakland Raiders at this point to see who gets the number 1 pick. And the Raiders look really bad. I mean, they have nobody. I think they just released Bruce Irvin as well. So, I mean, they're really just getting rid of everybody at this point. Derek Carr looks like one of the worst quarterbacks in NFL history right now. They got absolutely torched by that guy, Nick Mullins, who we have to play Monday night. So, it'll be interesting to see which team wins the tankathon the rest of the season. So next I had Drew Lock from Missouri. I honestly have not watched a lot of Drew Lock, but, from what I've seen, I haven't been too impressed. I mean, I love that he has a huge arm. Another guy who's, pretty good with throwing on the run and making plays outside of the pocket, which is something you need in today's NFL. He most likely will go in the first round if everything goes, as planned for him. He is 6'3", weighs about the same as Justin Herbert. So, I need to watch more of a lot of these guys. You really can't come to a conclusion in November, but, a lot of people talk about Drew Lock as a guy going in the first round, and he looks like he has everything an NFL quarterback should have. So it'll be interesting to see what he does the rest of the season. And, same with the next guy, Daniel Jones from Duke. I mean, I think I watched one video of one of his performances, and he does look like a legit player. I mean, he looks like a guy who's just really has really good technique. I mean, there was nothing that really stood out to me when watching Daniel Jones, and it was like, this guy plays for Duke football, which, I really did not think they had a football team until this year when I heard about Daniel Jones. So, he might be a first-round pick. The website I looked at said first round to third round. Could be something in there. He is 6'5", 215, which is, always good. A 6'5" quarterback is really the perfect height for what you want. And, most people aren't sure if he's going to declare this year, but if he does, then I'm sure some teams will be interested in him and take shots. But, as I said, he looks like a guy who just was born to play quarterback. Looks like he knows what he's doing. And, it'll be interesting to see what he does in, like, the combine and stuff like that. And, where his draft stock rises or if it falls. Because, I could see him being a first-round pick, but I could also see him being, like, a fifth-round pick if things don't go well the rest of the season. So, I mean, ultimately, it sounds like he'll go back to school, but we'll have to see. So next we have Will Grier out of West Virginia. I'm pretty sure he played for University of Florida in his freshman year, but something happened. I think he might have got suspended for PEDs or something like that. I mean, as I said many times, I'm really not a huge college football fan. I don't watch it like week by week, but I definitely I like looking into players and watching highlights, game film, all that kind of stuff of potential Giants players. So that I always enjoy, but I really don't like to sit down and watch full college games. But for Will Grier, I mean, he kind of gives me like a Baker Mayfield type of vibe, where it's just like this guy that has like this infectious personality and can motivate his teammates, and he's not like undersized. I mean, 6'2" is a good height for a quarterback, but I mean, compared to these guys that are monsters like 6'5", 6'6", like Herbert, Daniel Jones, even Tyree Jackson on the bottom there. But Will Grier is the kind of guy who I would say is like, I would say Baker Mayfield light. He's not as impressive as Baker was at Oklahoma, but there are things he does that really impress you. So from the website I looked at, he's projected to go from rounds 1 to 4. From what I've seen, he's an accurate passer. Scouts say they're concerned about his arm strength, so not sure if that's really going to be an issue or not, but that's what they said at least. And he might be a good quarterback. I mean, really, who knows? It's so hard to scout these guys. I mean, I love quarterbacks that have personality and guys that can, motivate their teammates. And, no knock on Eli Manning, but I mean, I like a quarterback that's vocal and is not afraid to yell at their teammates and stuff like that, because, I think quarterback is by far the most important position on the field, and you want a leader out there. You want a guy that can, just set examples and all that kind of stuff. And that's why I said when Kyle Aletta got arrested this weekend, it was not a good example, because that's the most important position on the field. You need guys to look up to you and stuff like that. So I think Will Grier, from a personality standpoint, is just what you need, but I'm not sure talent-wise if he really is as good as Justin Herbert, Drew Lock, those kind of guys. So he did have a big win this weekend. Of course, I forget who they played, but he had a really nice pass, game-winning touchdown, and so that was cool to see. But I think Will Grier has a chance to have his stock rise, and I think he's in an interesting situation right now. So I mean, I think right now he's focused on like winning the Heisman, and just he's focused on college, and I guess we'll deal with the NFL stuff and after the season's over. So up next, there's Dwayne Haskins from Ohio State. And Haskins is a guy I've actually watched a good amount of. I've watched a lot of highlights from him and game film. And he's pretty impressive. I mean, I think right now he's kind of underrated and under the radar. He's projected to go in the second or third round based off the website I looked at. He's 6'3", 220, has a good arm and a good completion percentage. I think his completion percentage is over 70%, if I read it right, which is amazing, of course. And I think Haskins is a guy who is he's not crazy athletic and doesn't wow you with anything, but he just looks like a really good player. He's a guy that does everything well, and another guy that can extend plays. I mean, everyone on this list can really extend plays, which I love. I mean, that's really what the current NFL is. There really are no more pocket passers coming out of college football. But Dwayne Haskins is a guy that he's one of those guys that needs to improve on things to be like great. But I think right now he's just a really good quarterback. So. Of course, he's still young, and if he gets to the right coaching staff and is worked on the right way, and they utilize the things he's good at, then I think he can become a really good quarterback. So I wouldn't mind a Dwayne Haskins pick. I do like the potential there, and he looks like a solid quarterback. So it really depends on what coaching staff gets him, and what they can turn him into. And of course, I trust Pat Shurmur to develop a young quarterback. So wouldn't mind Dwayne Haskins as well if they got him in like the third round or something like that. So last I have Tyree Jackson. He's really not mentioned by a lot of people. I think he's a junior this year, and not a lot of people are talking about him coming out, but he's kind of like Cam Newton in a way. I mean, he's 2 inches taller, and they're around the same weight, but if you watch this guy play, he's just a monster. And he does play for Buffalo, a small school. I believe Khalil Mack went there, but outside of that, I really don't know much about Buffalo college football. But I have watched a lot of Tyree Jackson this year. He's athletic, has a huge arm, and can extend plays, more importantly. Just a really tough guy to bring down, obviously, with that kind of height and the athleticism he has. And he's kind of underrated in terms of his accuracy. I mean, I don't know why he's not up there with a lot of other these guys on the list. I mean, maybe because he plays at a small school and he was like a 3-star recruit out of high school or something like that. But he really has impressed me if you guys watch his film. Of course, you could just watch on YouTube or something. And every time I've seen this guy play, he's been terrific. I tried to watch him play tonight before the Nets game started, and his team was just beating the living hell out of Kent State, and there was like 40-mile-per-hour winds, so I really didn't get to see a lot of Tyree Jackson passing the ball. It was just pretty much all the running backs. But from what I've seen from him in the highlights and stuff like that, he looks like a real player. And of course, there's things he needs to work on, like his progressions and moving his feet in the pocket. Sometimes he gets those cement feet and doesn't move around that well. But I mean, when you talk about arm strength and placing the ball in the right spot, when a guy has a big arm, you are concerned about his medium accuracy, his short accuracy. But from what I've seen, I mean, his slant passes are always in the right spot, and can hit guys in the flat easily and stuff like that. So I'm really impressed with Tyree Jackson. I think he'll be the most interesting case in this draft to see what happens. His stock could move up a lot. He can end up being a first-round pick if everything goes right. Really depends on how the combine goes and stuff like that. They need to compare him to the other quarterbacks from this class, but I mean, to have a guy that has the physical tools of Tyree Jackson, I mean, I would love it. And I don't think he'll be in the first round, so I mean, I would take a shot on this guy if the Giants rolled into next season with Bridgewater or Brissette and had like a Tyree Jackson behind them. Then that would be totally fine with me. See if you can make Tyree into a great quarterback, because I think he has the tools to do it. So it'll be interesting to see what happens as the season goes on for them. So that will do it. Thanks for watching, guys. That's the 11 quarterbacks I have that might start for the Giants next year. Probably none of these guys will end up starting for the Giants next year. But, hopefully it's Herbert. That's my number one choice, and I'm praying for that to happen. But based off what's happened with the Giants the last few years, nothing seems to go right for them. So I'm sure the Raiders will just end up losing out, and we'll end up winning one more game the rest of the year and get the second overall pick, and probably end up with Derek Carr next year, who is not on my list because I do not want Derek Carr. But I would not put it past us to do something like that at this point. But, if there's a guy that I'm forgetting or a college player that you think I should watch or something like that, then definitely leave that in the comments and, comment on what you think the Giants will do in terms of their quarterback position next year. And please do not say Eli Manning should start next year, because I will not take that seriously. I mean, I don't know how you could watch games and still think Eli can play in this league, but I guess we're all entitled to our own opinions, but I will not entertain stuff like that, so just letting you guys know in advance. But that'll do it. I'll talk to you guys after the Niners game. It's a game we have a chance to win, which is scary to say, because at this point I just want to suck and get suck for the duck, as they say, and get Justin Herbert. But I really don't know what to expect. Nick Mullins looked amazing on Thursday Night Football. They have a lot of time to prepare, and the Giants are the more talented team, obviously, but who really knows at this point? So I'll talk to you guys next week.